when you label yourself as something, you just become more of that thing. So that was one of the things I had to break right away, is like calling myself a procrastinator. I called myself an action taker, right?
Yeah. I do it as a Pomodoro clock, and it's
Mm-hmm.
so silly, so stupid that I
Mm-hmm.
push this LCD and it puts 20 minutes and starts counting down, but it
Mm-hmm.
works, man. When
Yeah.
I see that timer, I go, don't do anything else for 20 minutes. No social media, no internet, no email, just this.
I have an ability to assimilate myself into any culture that you put me in. So when I spent time in Vietnam and Thailand, I wasn't living there, but even just traveling, I could be there for just a few days and I could start to assimilate myself towards how they did things there. Here's the thing about imposter syndrome is that it will always hold you back no matter where you're at on the path.
Yeah. It wouldn't matter if you went to Mars and were by yourself 100% of the time. The resistance will follow you there to where when you have a running partner at the end of the run, you exchange running shoes so that if they don't show up tomorrow, you can't run.
I want to make myself so good that they can't ignore me.
It's not that I'm naturally loaded with grit or resilience. I do those things because I know if I don't do those things, I immediately start to lose my edge in life. Today, we're being joined by international best-selling author Scott Allen. And he has a great many titles you can check out that are very Kindle friendly. The book we're talking about today is Do the Hard Things First. And he gives a lot of tips about overcoming procrastination and things of that nature today. A lot of insights into really getting into how do I accomplish those things that I am avoiding today. In today's podcast, we're going to talk a lot about meal planning and what a game changer it is to manage your willpower. So I want to encourage you to check out my invention, the Spout. TheSproutSpout.com is where you can go to place your order, and we have a discount code for our listeners. It is in the show notes. And if you're watching this, you can see mine right here. It's currently growing a bunch of mung beans. This will last me probably 4 or 5 days of adding those to my wraps and salads. I think it's one of the most underestimated seeds that we sell, quite frankly. It's very affordable, and it's extremely easy to grow the mung bean seeds. They're very forgiving with any missing watering days and a little bit of over or under soaking. They're very forgiving. So go to sproutspout.com to check out that. I would love your feedback. Where we've been started pushing for reviews here lately. Please be one of those people. And our newsletter is, we are now sending out our newsletter on a weekly basis. So please join the newsletter at sproutspout.com. With that, enjoy your interview with Scott Allen. Scott Allen, thank you for being on Chasing Energy today.
Thanks for having me on the show.
Yes. Yeah, you're an author, a content creator, and a global influencer. You've written a great many books with over 500,000 copies worldwide. The first one I want to talk to you about is Do the Hard Thing, right? When I think about my historic self-dev, I think of the phrase eating the frog, right? They say if you have to eat a frog, do it first in the morning. So my first question for you is, how do you right size the hard thing in order to make it palatable, in this case, going back to the frog, but something that people are willing to not be necessarily deterred by?
Yeah. So I think that, the book has been compared to that other book a lot, because that's really, I think when I set out to write Do the Hard Things First, the first book in the series, and there's actually 5 books out now, we have a plan to do for probably 9 of them. It turned into a series and a brand in itself. But the first book was on how to overcome procrastination, which is really what Eat the Frog is about. I did study a lot of other books on the topic. And the reason I wrote a book on that is because of my own personal struggle with chronic procrastination.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So it was really
Me searches is what it's often called.
Yeah, for sure. When I first started this project, I was struggling with getting the priorities finished. I had projects all over the place, just stuff that I wasn't getting done. I would start one project, get halfway through it, start another one. And over time, I just had hundreds of unfinished. So I made a list. I went through my house. I made a list of anything that was just something. If something was not in the right spot, or if I had to declutter a room, whatever it was, it went on the list. And there were some things on that list that were very hard to do that I didn't want to do. And this is the concept of the book, is that you're always going to have resistance against the things that are hard to do because they are hard. And ideally, like, we want to do the easy stuff and the hard stuff. Like if you're a procrastinator, which by the way, I don't recommend labeling yourself as a procrastinator. I did for many years. And when you label yourself as something, you just become more of that thing. So that was one of the things I had to break right away, is like calling myself a procrastinator. I
Hmm.
called myself an action taker, right?
Yeah.
And that was the first step. But
Maybe
so,
even have the term former procrastinator if you want
yeah,
more.
that's good too. But what it really is about, though, is building trust with yourself, right? Because
Yeah.
what happens is when you get all these things piled up that you're not doing, you start to feel guilty. You start to, call
Shame.
yourself a
Yeah.
loser and shame and all that. And so taking action, even if it's, so what I did with that list is I actually looked at the easiest things on the list and I just started doing those. Something that was like a 5 minute phone
Yeah.
call,
Mhm.
if it was an email, whatever it was, I
Yeah.
would just do one thing on the list, because every time you cross something off on that list, and I had a list of like 200 things on there, if not more, you start to build that confidence meter, starts to move up and up
Yeah.
and up and up. And you're moving towards those harder things, right?
Hmm.
So I didn't just go for the hardest thing on the list, because I probably would have just gotten stuck again.
Yeah.
But I started doing the easiest things, and just building up to it. Like a muscle, you've got to work it. Yeah.
Here is that
Mm.
you target the tasks that are going to build inertia. So when
Mm-hmm.
the flywheel starts to turn, it's much more easy to go ahead and go on to the next thing. I keep this timer. I do it as a Pomodoro clock. And it's
Mm-hmm.
so silly, so stupid that I
Mm-hmm.
push this LCD and it puts 20 minutes and starts counting down, but it works,
Mm-hmm.
man. When
Yeah.
I see that timer, I go, don't do anything else for 20 minutes. No social media, no internet, no email, just this for 20 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, once by the time you've reset it 3 times, you're in that zone of like, man, I'm getting so much done. But to your point, it takes sometimes silly things that what would it take for me to be engaged in this task? I love that.
Mm.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Scott.
Yeah, and I love the timer, by the way. I have my own, because mine has like a 5, 10, and 30 minutes on it. But I mean, I'm probably going to get one where it has 15 or 20 minutes, because I think that's the zone where if you can stick with
So
something for that long.
check this
Um,
out. You just move it to whatever you want and then hit
oh,
start.
I like
And
that.
Amazon for like 15, $20. And
Yeah.
it's a USB-C recharge, so you never have to deal with batteries. So I don't even remember the last time I charged it. It's been at least a month or
Mm,
so. But
mm, mm,
point being, it's completely adjustable to find your specific. You don't have to set it for 20 minutes.
mhm,
You can set it
mhm.
to your specific zone of like, this is how long it takes me to get into flow. And then, of course, by the idea there is not necessarily to be done, but engaged, right?
Well, I'm getting one of those.
I'll send you a link or
Sure.
something. Yeah.
Yeah.
Are you in Canada?
I'm from Canada, but I've been living in Japan for the last 26 or 27 years. So
Okay.
I'm in
Yeah.
Osaka.
I love that. And then I'm going to ask you some questions about Japan. I knew you'd
Sure.
gone there, but I wasn't sure if you were still there. I can hear the
Yeah.
Canadian part. Um,
I get that a lot.
yeah. Oh, it's a lovely accent. So I've got a couple questions here, so I'll skip around
Sure.
since we're already talking about Japan, correct?
Sounds good.
Corporate business trainer in Japan and success strategist. The first question I want to ask you is what cultural differences did you incorporate into your mindset after you went, or your approach or
Mm.
process, as they say in Canada? What did you incorporate after you were in Japan as part of that culture?
Yeah. So I came to Japan really not knowing a lot about the country or the culture. I was hired by a company when I was still in Canada. They brought like 3 people over to work in this business school or an English school. So basically, I went from becoming an electrical engineer and an English teacher overnight.
Yeah.
No training. I have no formal education in education or anything like that. I was never a teacher. But that's the great thing about living here, is they'll give you all the skills you need. You just have to be able to speak the language. I kind of had that down pat, so that was okay. But the cultural differences, I mean, I think a lot of it was just around the mannerisms, like you don't know what you don't know. So there's this, I mean, you hear like, when you walk into somebody's house, of course, you take off your shoes and those things. I think a lot of people know that stuff already, but there are just some things around like, they would we use sign language for certain things, like peace and this and that. And there are things that they would use for sign language that you just didn't understand what it meant. And because if you can't understand the spoken language, then the sign language doesn't make any sense either, right? So there was like some of that stuff to figure out. Driving was interesting, driving on the left side of the road as opposed to the right. The only accident I've ever been in my life was on my third day in here in Japan, where I rear-ended a car because I got lost and it was dark, and I just happened to not see where I was going. So I ended up in the police station trying to explain why I had ran into this car in the middle of the night. So there was a lot of things that had happened, which were interesting experiences when I look back on it now. But a lot of it was like, yeah, a lot of the cultural differences, just there were so many.
What I'm looking for is
Mm.
what cultural differences did you incorporate into your approach towards preaching change? Like, for
Yeah.
example, my background is Lean Six Sigma, and
Mm.
which is completely Japanese methodology of eliminating
Mm.
waste, process, non-value add, things like that. So
Mm.
when I look at any business or any particular like prospect or process, I immediately, regardless of whether I make a cognitive like effort, it immediately starts. I start looking for waste in these
Mm.
processes because of
Mm.
that
Mm. Mm.
training. So I was just kind of curious as to when you're actually. I have zilch experience with being in the Japanese culture. I was just
Mm.
curious as to when you think about whether it's work ethic or transformation, what parts of that did you incorporate from your living experience there?
Yeah, certainly the work ethic, because I've always had a strong work ethic. And when I came here, that's probably the one reason I was able to adapt to the culture, like, especially the work culture, because it can be really tough. They expect you to work long hours. Of course, you have to be there on time. You sometimes will stay a lot later when you're working in the company. But for me, that was okay, right? I mean, I was already used to the long hours, like the hard work and that kind of thing. So there's also the you're familiar with the Kaizen, right? Like making yourself 1% better all the time. That's a lot of I would say my lifestyle, my mindset is always based on that. Like yourself, having read a lot of books on self development, I'm always looking for ways to improve myself. So every time I was in a personal situation or in a corporate culture, I'm always looking for that 1%. Like, how can I make myself 1% better for the next day? A lot of people are already familiar with that process, probably mostly through Toyota. I don't know if they invented it, but they certainly used it to build their trillion
Close,
dollar
pretty close.
car.
The origins of it are Deming's 14 quality points that he preached
Yeah.
to them shortly after World War II.
Right.
And
Right.
he was renowned for change and quality, and America didn't embrace that because we were already at the top of the
Yeah.
chain after World War II.
Yeah, I'm actually reading through that book now, The Toyota Way.
Yeah,
But yeah,
just
I
in
would say
time
like,
manufacturing and all that.
I think my overall attitude, my mindset, some people jokingly said, you act very Japanese. And I don't think I wasn't intentionally trying to act Japanese. I was just I have an ability to assimilate myself into any culture that you put me in. So when I spent time in Vietnam and Thailand, I wasn't living there, but even just traveling, I could be there for just a few days and I could start to assimilate myself towards how they did things there. And I would start to pick up on their mannerisms and their cultural way of living. So I certainly did the same thing in Japan as well. And I continue to do that to this day. And I think maybe it's why I was able to stay for as long as I could. I know some people who are here for 6 months to a year and they were having a meltdown. They had to go back home. Yeah.
Let's take it, and because we started off by talking about procrastination,
Mm.
and the labeling that comes with that. What do you find in terms of the contrast between, say, Canadians or Americans in terms of procrastination versus Japan? How common is that? How prevalent is that? And how do they deal with it over there?
Mm. Procrastination is not something that they take well to here, because when you say you're going to do something, you have to get it done, right?
Mhm.
And when I was working in, whether it was the school system or a company, you couldn't just show up and say, "Oh, I didn't get it done," because they may not fire you, but you will get put to the back of the stock room or somewhere where they don't want to
Yeah,
see you ever again, right?
yeah.
So, and here's the interesting thing too. Like, I would procrastinate in my personal life extensively, right? But you put me in a work situation and I might do it for a little
Yeah.
while until I couldn't actually get away with it any longer. And then like I would get it done. But in work, I would almost always perform like I'll say like 95%.
Yeah.
Whereas in my personal life, if I'm not held accountable for something, I'm like, yeah, I'll just put that off until tomorrow. And then the pattern starts. But
So
when
in
you're,
this case, what you're saying is a lot of times our level of procrastination is directly correlated to the expectations that we've and accountability that we have for our falling short. For example, nobody cares necessarily
mm,
if you're running behind on your house projects, but if you're running behind on your work projects, there's a social pressure and expectation that comes with that. So you don't want to let yourself or your peers down.
that's a great way of putting it. Exactly. So when I have those expectations, when I know that people expect me to show up at a certain time of day and deliver this presentation, it'll get done. Right. But surprisingly, like I may not hold that same level for myself. So I think
Yeah.
there's definitely something to look into there,
I think it's actually quite rare that
Mm,
we have people that hold themselves to a higher expectation in their
mm,
personal life than they do their work. Certainly something that I strive to do and have not been successful with.
mm,
So,
mm,
all right, this is great. So let's talk a little bit about embracing imposter syndrome. That is, I
mm,
know that's something you like to talk about. And the imposter syndrome obviously is a double-edged sword, right? Because if you're even using that term, you're having the opportunity to stretch yourself in some
mhm.
way.
Yeah.
So I'd like you to talk a little bit about your take on imposter syndrome and the benefits and potentially consequences that come from that.
Yeah. So the imposter syndrome is when I first started writing, actually, I had the goal to publish a book, but to be honest with you, it took me 3 or 4 years to finish it. I didn't really believe when I actually looked deep down into my soul, I didn't really believe I was going to publish the book. I was just telling myself that I was going to. And when it got close to the end, I put it off for as long as I can because I was telling myself, well, who am I to publish a book? No one's going to read it. I'm not a writer. These kinds of things that go through your head, you know.
Yeah.
But here's the thing about imposter syndrome is that it will always hold you back no matter where you're at on the path,
Yeah.
right? And the only way to get through it is to just put yourself out there. Like that's it. Imposter syndrome is only going to stick around for the first little while until you actually practice the thing long enough. If you want to put a book out there, put it out there. If
Yeah.
you still feel like you're not worthy, put another one out there. Same thing with doing public speaking, right? When I started doing public speaking, I was like, well, nobody's going to want to listen to me. I'm not very good at it. I had all these excuses. And I just started doing a bunch of them and I got better at it. And eventually the imposter syndrome, it still lingers a little bit depending on, I don't know, like the day or the week, whatever it is, or my attitude that day. But the more that I worked at something, like the less of that I experienced,
Yeah.
right? So really like taking action will get you through that.
I like the term Stephen Pressfield uses, which is the resistance, right? In his book, The War on Art, he talks about no matter, this was one of my favorite phrases from that book. And it wouldn't matter if you went to Mars and were by yourself 100% of the time, the resistance will follow you there to where,
Mhm.
where you always hear that nagging voice saying, you don't have to do this. You're not good enough. No, you don't need to be doing this.
Yeah.
Embracing that is part of like I sometimes when I hear it, I go, you can use that as a compass and say, what am I? The phrase that I use in my day to day life, Scott, is I find myself going, what are you avoiding? And I say that out loud to myself. I
Mm.
go, what are you
Mhm.
avoiding right now? For example, I reach for my phone and open up a social media app and I'll start scrolling and I go, what is it that you're avoiding right at
Mm.
this moment? Why are you doing this? What uncomfortable thought or task or project that you need to start on and should be working on cause you to
Mm.
say, this will be a good deterrent from that.
Mm. 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 Yeah, I frequently find myself scrolling through TikTok multiple times per day.
It's funny because I actually have a product, the invention that I have sells on TikTok, and I had to get on TikTok and all those things. And
Mm.
it is a love hate relationship with that thing. I don't like opening it. I heard the term one time, fentanyl for the brain, and I was like, wow, this really is like beyond any social media thing I've ever seen. It is immediate dopamine release as
Exactly,
fast as you can take it. So it's a slippery slope to say the least. Or
for
there's
sure.
we tell ourselves when it comes to things like television and things, there's stuff out there that you can grow from. But I will say on TikTok, you have to seek it out. Like you have to, if you're going to find something that's going to help you grow, you're going to actually have to seek it out on TikTok. And, whether it's some of Robert Greene's content is really good.
Mhm. Mhm.
Stephen, Start With Why. Simon Sinek. Simon Sinek, he has
Mhm.
some
Mhm.
great, but it's hard to be diligent on those platforms.
Yeah, absolutely.
I
Uh,
want to add one note on procrastination, and that
sure.
is I do struggle with procrastination like most people. And I have one little trick I do.
Mm,
So, for example, I'll give you two quick examples. If you've ever made sourdough, the worst part is getting started. I mean,
mhm.
getting everything ready the night before so you can start mixing it the next day.
Mm,
I'm going to have to get that starter out, drain it, feed it, measure it, get everything ready to go.
mm,
And then the other one is I mopped the house yesterday, which I hate. The idea of having clean floors is fantastic, but the idea of getting that
mm,
mop out. But
mm,
so with both of those, what I do to overcome my struggle with procrastination is just say all you have to do is, in the example of the former, just set it
mm,
out on the counter. Just take the sourdough starter,
mhm,
just set it on the counter. You don't have to do anything. Just
mm,
set it on the counter.
mm,
And
mm,
with the cleaning the floors, all I have to do is put the mop in the hallway. I don't have to mop. I
mm,
just set it in the hallway. And my brain within an hour or two will be like, we can't let this thing just sit here. We have to take action. So I almost create an itch for myself that I have to
yeah,
scratch and just use that logic against myself. Just make it so
mm,
uncomfortable that you'd almost have to start, right?
mm,
How we often rise when there's accountability or expectations. You were talking about in your professional life versus your personal life.
mm,
I heard this tidbit for people who struggle with fitness and commitment. When you have a running partner, at the end of the run, you exchange running shoes so that if they don't show up tomorrow, you can't run. I like that
I
one.
like that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's plenty in especially in my endurance athlete years. There's plenty of times I would have definitely skipped the run if I didn't know, if I had not already told somebody I'll be there tomorrow. If you want to do this thing tomorrow, well, I'll do this thing. So
Yeah. What I'll do is, so that I make sure that I remind myself to go to the gym, is like I'll pack my bag and leave it in
yeah,
the front, like near the front door,
yeah.
just so as a reminder with my shoes next to it, like, oh yeah, I'm going to the gym today because my bag is waiting there for me.
It's one of those, kind of going back to the Pomodoro timer.
Hmm.
It's shockingly simple how effective these type of things are, to where you
Hmm.
go, it's already done. One of my favorite studies recently with people who maintain health over multiple years, the most common habit they had was to pre-make their meals for the week. And you
Hmm.
think to yourself, that's such a silly thing, planning out your meals Monday through Friday for lunch, for example.
Hmm.
But it
Hmm.
works. I've been doing it for 15 years. When I was a corporate employee, on Monday I would bring in all my lunch for the week and then just
Hmm.
mix it as the week went by. I was never tempted to eat out. It took the willpower and allowed me to use that willpower towards the workouts instead of having to go out to eat and try to find something on the menu that hit my macros and
Hmm.
micros. I love your example though. Put that gym bag by the door.
Hmm.
Tell me what it's like when it comes to the health culture over there.
Yeah, I mean, they do eat a lot of, I think, sushi, as you know. I don't know if sushi is that healthy. I think there's a lot of rice as well. Over the last, I don't know, a few decades, like they certainly have a lot of McDonald's here. Like there's thousands of them actually.
I never would have thought about that.
Yeah,
Interesting.
it's the one, like, I mean, you can only find Burger King in Tokyo, but there's like a few Subways here and there. But Subway's not bad. But I mean, like the fast food restaurants, there's certainly a lot more than there used to be, but only about a quarter as many as we still have in Canada and the US, right? But I'm going to say though, for the most part, the kids at school, for example, they what they call a kyushoku, which is like the school lunch. And when I worked in the school system, I used to eat the lunch with the kids, and it's like fish, soup, and rice. It's very well balanced and really healthy. So everybody eats the same thing, right? In the school system. But here's the thing: I think it falls apart when they get into the corporate culture, because once they get into the companies, a lot of the companies have these cafeterias, right?
Mhm.
So that they don't want people like actually leaving the company and going to, I mean, where they're going to go, like a convenience store or something like that. But in the company, the corporate culture, these cafeteria food, it's almost like feeding cattle. The food's not very, like, quality is really bad. It's very cheap. So a lot of the employees will say, yeah, their lunch here is only like $3 or $4, and it's really just designed to keep them working for the rest of the day, I think. And a lot of people, once they get into the working life, they actually stop exercising. They stop doing a lot of things. They just end up working and eating really bad food.
I'm sorry to hear that. Yeah, that's
Mhm.
pretty traumatic. I've been in different cultures, but I will tell you the one that I always thought was burning the candle at both ends was sales cultures, where it was like
Mm,
sell, sell, sell. And man, you talk about Red Bulls and chicken tenders to whatever it took to get through that day and get through 100 cold
mm,
calls, they would do it, is what.
yeah, yeah.
So, what is when you think about the things that you're most excited? You shared some goals with me before we got on the air about what you're looking to accomplish this year. Tell me what you're
Mm.
most excited about doing with the remainder of this year.
Yeah, I want to make myself really, really like how do I put this? As Cal Newport would have said it, I want to make myself so good that they can't ignore me, right?
Yeah,
And I don't mean
it's
that
Steve
from like
Martin coined that quote, by the way.
I didn't know that. Okay,
That's where Cal got it from.
I
He
didn't know
cites
that.
him. Yeah.
Oh,
So
oh
when you
wow,
think of that, remember Steve Martin.
I will. Yeah. But yeah, I kind of got away a little while for like I was getting really focused into, and I'm still focused on. I love business. I love building the business and that, but and making like okay, making money and everything. But when that just became the goal, it really wasn't like it didn't stimulate me. Right?
Yeah.
I realized like why am I not getting ahead? Oh, because I'm not actually, to quote Jim Rohn, you've got to work harder on yourself than in your business, right? I think
Yeah.
Jim said that, and he's right. Because when I wasn't working, when I kind of stopped working
Yeah.
on myself as much and working on the business more, I just didn't, I felt way out of whack, like really
Yeah.
out of balance, and I'm still kind of like getting over that and getting back into reading and learning and meditating again. And it's a practice. I mean, you really have
It
to
really is.
hold yourself to the torch for that one, right?
Plus,
Whatever
you get
like book.
immediate results when you jump on a computer.
And it's really hard to track the results when because you can't, even if you are getting better, it's like if nobody else is like watching you going, wow, you really got good at that thing. Then if there's no
Mhm.
feedback, then you're just like, you're going to go for the one thing where you can actually see the result, which may be like, oh, I got more money this week, or I got like whatever it might be. Right. Um,
I think James Clear refers to that as what's called a lagging indicator. So you're starting to get those results.
right.
That's a sign
Right.
of a good process.
Yeah, so I love that process. I mean, and I think that again, I just have to make it a daily reprieve where I'm, waking up, putting in call it the morning routine. I mean, for me,
Hmm.
it's like deep breathing, meditation, a bit of reading before I start work. So I usually start pretty early. I like to start like around 7 o'clock or 8 o'clock. So but you always have to come back to the self. Like, and again, if we're not working on ourselves,
Yeah.
I feel like the rest of it's not going to matter anyway. And if you're not taking care of your health and you get sick, well, you can't do the work anyway. So you've got to take care of like making the meals ahead of time. That's perfect. Like you've got your meals stacked up in your fridge. I love that idea. I haven't actually done that before. I'm more like,
Hmm.
okay, I know what I'm going to eat, but it's like I have to go and prepare it and stuff like that. Having everything laid out ahead makes perfect sense because now you're just eliminating the risk of procrastinating and, eating junk food, for example.
Yeah. Never try to make big decisions first thing in the morning. As many
Mm,
barriers to entry as you like, literally, I don't like to choose what I'm going to wear for the day in the
mm-hmm,
morning. I'd
mm,
rather just lay it out. So it's all move, move, move. Baumeister, who does the willpower theory,
mm,
will tell you that you start your day off with a bucket. And
mm-hmm,
with each passing hour, that bucket of willpower gets lower, which, by the
mm,
way, is the theories as to why people do really stupid things with their life in the evening, like make big mistakes in their life. We'll leave
mm-hmm,
it at that. But I always look at that and go, conserve that bucket to
mm,
where that by the time it's 8 or 9 in the evening and you're detaching, it's near the end. You don't want it full at the end because you haven't done anything. But
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
I try to be cognizant of that. And I love your approach to, I mean, the thing I'm hearing, like the Lexus mantra is the relentless pursuit of perfection, right?
mm,
And focusing on the self in terms of not in a selfish way, but sharpening your own sword,
mm-hmm,
it is especially when you've made it past what David Brooks would call the first mountain. You're in the second mountain of your
mm,
life. I would assume you're in the second mountain as well, which is you've made it past the first three levels of Maslow's hierarchy. And you're
Mm-hmm.
kind of like, what do I do now that's going to bring me fulfillment? You've gotten past the
Mm-hmm.
money, you've gotten past the food and shelter, you've got family or whatever. What am I going to do with this? And what I have found is kind of like what you just said, which is you have to you have to kind of, whether it's a love or hate day with yourself, you have to respect the self development angle of, you said, the deep breathing, right? And
Mm-hmm.
for me, it's I do like the cold plunge and all that in the morning to start
Mm-hmm.
my day. It's not that I'm naturally loaded with grit or resilience. I do those things because I know if I don't do those things, I immediately start to lose my edge in life. The caveat there is no one cares, right? Except for us, but it's
Mm-hmm.
important that we care. People can sense that you care about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I sense it.
I
I
love
sense
that.
that you're stepping up to the next level here. I'm glad I get to be a part of it.
You sense right. Yeah. I mean, that's interesting because, today was one of these days where like I did a bunch of Zoom calls in the morning and my bucket, by the way, is depleted by 12 o'clock. And I
Yeah.
just like, I had a bunch of other stuff that I wanted to do. And I was just like, I didn't have a lot left. And I thought, but I felt guilty just kind of sitting around thinking, not really working. You're kind of like between where, well, I should be working, but I'm
Yeah.
just going to watch some more Netflix. And I realized, like, okay, if I'm not going to work, I'm going to go outside and just get out there and do something, right? Went to the gym yesterday, so I'm not going to do that today. I'm going to take a day off, but I just went for a long walk and just enjoyed feeling guilty about not working for the rest of the day. But maybe like we need more of that, though. I needed
Oh,
more of
the
that.
the
Like,
transition
trying
space.
the
I've
transition
I've
space.
learned when I was in my 20s and 30s, I didn't need much transition. I could
Mm-hmm.
hop out of one thing and go in the I could leave the television and go straight to bed and go to sleep.
Mm-hmm.
Those I
Mm-hmm.
now have to respect that there's a gap depending on what I just went through. But for me,
Mm-hmm.
obviously not feasible for everybody, but for me, my number one hack for the last year has been going out to the barrel sauna an hour before bed.
Mm.
No phone, just a book. And by the time I've sweated out in there, I'm like, you know what? I don't need any more stimulation today. I'm ready to call it. But it took that trend. It forces me into a space where I have to transition, right? Because you don't
Mm.
really want to
Mm.
take technology and things like that in there, and
Yeah.
respecting that I just can't turn off the monkey in the back of my head that's hitting the cymbals.
Yeah, that's great. I love that, the transition space. But that's exactly what it was. Just like, okay, I've accepted the fact that I'm just going to think about like what is the next level? What am I really working towards? What am I working on that's actually not beneficial to my life and
Yeah,
my business and my family and all this, right? And kind of starting to question these things. And
yeah,
I realized like, wow, so there's a lot more to it than just like, because I'm just like put me in front of the computer. I might stay here for like 3 or 4 hours just working on a bunch of random stuff.
mm,
That's just not good for the bucket because you'll deplete yourself very quickly and you'll put in a day's work and realize you got nothing done.
absolutely.
Yeah.
These
Yeah.
are wise words here. You remind me of a lot of how I feel if I don't journal for the day. If I journal for like 5-10
Mm,
minutes, I usually have some type of structure. I
mm,
almost always regret not doing that.
yeah.
So, where can people find out more about you and when your next book is, or I
Mm.
should say, you're not really targeting books right now, so maybe your existing book collection.
Yeah, well, oh, to be honest, I've got multiple books in the pipeline all the time. We've got one coming out in October, but they can find more about me at scottallenbooks.com.
Hmm.
We have the Shopify store set up there. We're still building a lot of things out, but yeah, put a lot of work into it so they can go there. I also have a newsletter that I put out like once or twice a week. And so they can join the newsletter as well.
Yeah, it's very
Yeah,
thorough.
and they go there, they can pretty much find everything. I love Linktree because everything's just like lined up right there, all
Yeah.
the interviews I've done and stuff like that. So yeah, I just point them in that direction. And hey, you can always go to Google and just plug in Scott Allen books or Scott Allen interviews, and they can find a lot of interviews on there too. Well, I think it's just because I wanted to get really better at the public speaking thing, but also just being able to talk about these things. Like a lot of people were saying, well, you've written a lot of books, but haven't seen much of you on social media, or where are your interviews? And I've done quite a few of them in the past, but it was only if people came to me and said, hey, would you mind doing, like, if they asked me, I'd be like, okay, sure, I'll do an interview. But
Yeah.
I'm really enjoying
Introvert
the
life.
journey.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much for sharing and making us part of your journey today.
It's been great.